New Westminster War Veterans Oral History Project. Today's date is November 21st, 2001. The interviewee is Mr. Barry Chaster, RCAF, attached to the RAF. Mr. Chaster, could you tell me your full name?
My full name is James Barry Chaster.
And your date and place of birth?
I was born on February the 4th, 1921 in Duncan, BC, Vancouver Island.
What is your marital status?
A widower.
And your wife's maiden name?
Catherine.
Catherine.
Last name?
Yes.
Williams.
Catherine Williams?
Right.
Okay. Do you have any children?
2. A boy, James Randolph, and a daughter, Barbara Jolene.
Grandchildren too?
Grandchildren, yes. Michael Chaster and Christine Abercrombie.
Good.
And great-grandchildren? 3 of them.
No kidding.
Yeah.
3 great-grandchildren.
3 grandsons.
Oh, okay. So your parents, where were they from?
They're from Canada.
Yeah.
Actually, they were from the prairies.
Yeah.
My mother was born in Elkhorn, Manitoba, and my father was born in Manitoba as well. Or Brandon, I can't remember the name.
Right. So, just briefly, describe to me how you ended up in being a resident of New Westminster.
Well, I left Duncan and proceeded to go into the Air Force and overseas. And when I came back, I attended UBC and took degrees in architecture and town planning, and started work in Vancouver and had the opportunity to become the city planner in New Westminster, which I took in 1966. So I've been in New Westminster ever since.
Just for the record, what is your current address?
Suite 1101, 1065 Quayside Drive, New Westminster.
So you mentioned that you were enrolled in the RCAF. What was your rank and position?
My rank when I enrolled, I guess, was an AC2. When I got my wings, I graduated as a sergeant pilot. And I went through the ranks till when I left the service in 1947, I was a flight lieutenant.
Okay.
Too long?
No, that's good. That's good. When did you enroll in the armed forces, and where?
I enrolled in Duncan, BC. No, I guess I enrolled in Vancouver in February the 6th, 1941. And
what did your family think of that?
In Duncan, there were a great number of people that were in the services and English backgrounds, and it was the thing to do at that time to join one of the services. So they didn't, as far as I know, think anything too much about the danger or the possibilities of going to war in a hurry.
Right. So it was almost a natural thing.
That almost seemed to be the thing to do.
Right. When you enrolled, did you enroll with friends or family, other siblings, or just on your own?
I started to enroll with a friend that I had just come back in 1939 from San Francisco at the World's Fair, and we decided we should join up. And so we both applied for the Air Force, and he got in and I got turned down.
Oh.
Because my blood pressure supposedly was too high. I'd just been swimming and a few other things. So he got in about 3 months ahead of me, so I got in 3 months later than he.
Oh, so
at that time I joined by myself, of course.
Right. So in terms of service, because you were in the militia before?
Yes, I was in there for a short period of time.
Okay. So how many years in total of service did you complete?
Well, about 7 altogether. 6.5 in the Air Force and about 6 months in the Army.
Oh, okay. Where were you discharged from duty?
In Ottawa.
In Ottawa?
Yes.
In 1947, right?
1947, 18th of July, I believe it was.
18th of July. So when you discovered that Canada had declared war, what sort of feelings were going through your mind?
I guess basically that I should get involved, but not necessarily in the front line to get bumped off. That wasn't exactly what I had in mind. So.
Right. Is that why you decided with the RCAF?
No, I knew I didn't particularly want to be in the Army after my short experience there, and I'd applied to the Navy because I had an uncle that was in the Navy at that time, and I also applied to the Air Force, and the Air Force happened to call me first, so I went there. So I would have been quite happy to have been in the Navy at that time. I wouldn't now, but I would have at that time.
Right. So when you got accepted into the RCAF, what sort of training did you get?
Well, I went to the Brandon Manning Pool, and went on guard duty at an air station that really wasn't open.
Okay.
If you call that training, marching and that type of thing, discipline-related items. And then I got selected for air crew, and I went to ITS, which is Initial Training Service, in Regina.
Okay.
And then I went to Thunder Bay, which was Fort William in those days, to start flying train as a pilot. So I started on Tiger Moss there, and then I went to Yorkton, Saskatchewan, to Harvard's there, and cut my wings in Yorkton.
Oh, okay. What was training camp like? Was it a good experience for you?
Well, it was certainly novel, and it was great, and I enjoyed it very much. I had a little trouble with the hay on a field one time, and I came back with a considerable amount of hay in my undercarriage and got reprimanded, I suppose, by being forced to march on the parade square with a parachute on my back and wash airplanes in the evening. So, other than that, it was a great experience, and I enjoyed it very much.
So you ended up really enjoying flying then?
Oh, yeah.
And how come you got hay on the bottom of your plane?
Well, I was practicing a forced landing, and I guess I got a little too low. Because to me, low flying was one of the nicest parts of flying.
Right.
Close to the ground, yeah.
So is it almost like joyriding then?
Yeah, when you're supposed to practice forced landings. Maybe not as many as I did.
So, when you got your wings, were you stationed first in Canada, or did you go straight over to the UK?
Yeah, after a brief stint at home, I went to Halifax and went out and went away in 1941.
1941?
Yeah.
What was your journey? Sorry, what was your journey like across the Atlantic?
A bit hectic. We were on the Louis Pasteur, a boat built for the southern waters, and we hit some major storm, and just about the rudder kind of went haywire, and the piano went across the mess hall and so forth. It was a bit hectic, but after that, it was okay.
Yeah.
We landed just out of Glasgow.
Right.
I can't remember the name of the place.
And then where were you?
Then we're immediately transported by train down to Bournemouth,
right,
south of England, and not too long later I was shipped back up to Scotland, to Montrose, Scotland, on the east coast, and started flying again there. Flew masters and hurricanes there.
Oh, okay. And is that what you ended up flying for the duration of the war?
No, that was just the start. I had another experience with practicing forced landings up there too, and knocked the windows off an aircraft. And shortly after that, I got posted to a beam approach course back in England again, and I was flying twin-engine aircraft, and the beam approach, you're under the hood most of the time, so I was learning to fly a twin-engine plane and learning to fly in the dark, if you like.
Oh, okay. Oh, is that?
So I assumed I was going into night fighters.
Oh, okay.
But immediately I got posted to a training squadron for bombers. I flew Wellingtons at an OTU, they call it. That training station, an OTU. An overseas training unit.
Okay.
That's quite right. So I was then in bomber command.
Right.
So I switched from fighters, which I thought I was going to be on, and I'd prefer to be on, like everybody else, but I ended up being a bomber pilot.
And what did that? And so when you actually started flying, did you, as a bomber, did you stay in England and then fly over to the continent and come back? Is that how it worked?
Yes, that's the way it worked. I did 2 flights from the OTU in Wellington,
right,
and the 1,000 bomber raids at the first Ruhr Valley. Well, I was still at, because I don't think they had 1,000 bombers, so they had to go to the OTUs to get them. So
I see.
I flew one as a second pilot and one as a captain on those 2. So that finished my OTU.
Right.
Then I went to a squadron, went to several squadrons, went to 83 Squadron next, and flew Manchesters and then Lancasters. And that squadron moved to a couple of other stations. And then I was posted to 83 Squadron, went for Pathfinders, and I hadn't much experience, so they posted me to 207 Squadron, which I served the rest of my overseas time on 207 Squadron.
And that was the RAF.
That was the RAF, yeah.
Right.
83, everything was RAF when I was over there.
Right.
And I did the rest of my operations out of OTU, out of 207 Squadron, which had relocated to Langar. I think I was either the first or the second airplane to land with my crew at Langar, and so we opened up a new station.
Oh, I see.
Much mud and muck, and so. Right.
So after you started doing your bombing missions, then give me a brief overview of what an average day for you would be.
We'd get up and not too early and have going on an operation. You'd get bacon and eggs across the road at the farm. I used to service that because that was the treat that people that went on operations got.
Oh, okay.
The only time you got them. And we then went to a briefing session in which they told us where the target would be, what the weather would be like, and what to look out for.
Right.
The different officers would inform us as to the conditions that we might expect.
Okay.
So then not much later, all my missions, not all of them, but most of them were at night. That was typical of the RAF bombing command. And so then I guess that's when we had the eggs before we took off. And
at night?
At night, in the evening. And then we collected ourselves together, got in a vehicle of some kind, and went out to the aircraft, did the usual routine, and all boarded. We sort of looked around, and then we boarded and took up our positions inside the aircraft. And as it was our turn to take off, we went out and routine takeoff. Knew what our bomb load was and all that. So we were ready to go.
Right.
We flew to the target.
And then
did our whatever was supposed to be done there, was dropping mines in the ocean or dropping bombs on some specific target. We did that. I know I did 5 trips to Italy, so that was the same routine as if you went to Denmark and dropped mines in the ocean off of Denmark or something. So we're quite varied in that respect. And I did one low-level daylight trip that was in southern France. We went around the Bay of Biscay and then came in low-level formation in the daytime.
Wow. And
then climbed up and came back home at night after it got dark. So other than that, they were fairly routine trips. My first one was to Essen in Wellington, and my last one was to Essen as well.
Right.
In Lancaster.
So, would the Lancaster be by itself, or would you have escorts or fighters?
No, we didn't normally have any fighters. Sometimes we started off for Italy and it was still light and we had some escort across the channel, but 90% of the time we didn't have any escorts. And there may have been somebody standing by around the coast as we went across, but not really.
Right.
We went individually, but we more or less went in a group, and we had specific times to cross places and specific times to drop their bombs. So
I see.
There was a collection of it, but not a sort of organized formation flying type. Sometimes you saw other aircraft. Sometimes you saw them go down in flames too.
No kidding, eh?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So before we get into what your experiences were like, first of all, I'd like you just to describe, your uniform and what sort of supplies you carried with you.
Well, I normally wore my battle dress, which is just standard battle dress that's not too different from the army, except it was blue. I carried with me a sheepskin jacket, a flake jacket. I never wore it as a rule. I had it in the back of my chair seat. Usually I just wore Oxfords and not boots. And I had a wedge cap that I stuck down inside my battle dress just to keep. And I had an escape kit, which was only about 6 inches by 4 inches by a half, 3/4 of an inch. And in that we had some compasses and a little bit of Horlicks chocolate and a map or two, and some first aid kit and some pills to put in water. Keep it clean. There may have been some other things. It was very small.
Yeah.
And I had that shoved on my battle dress front as well. That's where I carried it.
Right.
Other than that, I don't think I wore gloves. I wore a helmet.
Right.
And I can't think of anything else particularly unless you have some specific thing in mind.
No, that's good. I just wanted to, so that, we could get a picture of. What about mail service? Did you guys get lots of mail from back home, or were the postal people good, regular?
Well, it varied, because if you moved around from one station to another, it sometimes took quite a while to catch up with you.
Right.
But we used to get pretty good service. They'd send us from home. We'd get cigarettes and food, unusual kind we wouldn't get in England most of the time. And so we got parcels from home as well, with scarves, knitted scarves, and mitts and so forth. That somebody had showed that they cared a little bit, that they were aware we were overseas. Yeah.
Do you look forward to mail?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Seems like everyone did.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Huh. So, tell me about your experience on the continent. What was it like on the continent? How did you get to the continent?
Yeah. Well, on the 3rd of January 1943, that date seems to be etched in my brain now. We were on a flight to Essen, as I mentioned earlier, and it was an experiment using a new navigation equipment that was flown in mosquito bombers, and they were was supposed to be 10 tenths cloud, or fully covered with clouds, and the mosquitoes were to drop flares at, in this case, 15,000 feet, and we were to be about 18,000 and bomb them without seeing the ground.
I see.
Yeah. So this oboe, I guess it was, that we were using, H2S, it was in the mosquito, not in our planes. So there was only about 25 or 30 bombers on this particular raid. It was an experiment that didn't work, incidentally. When we got there, of course, it was 10 tenths cloud, as I mentioned earlier, and so everything was wide open. We got coneless searchlights because they could pick us out, and the fighters were up waiting for us, and that's, as a result of that, we got shot up, and the front hatch was jammed, and I'd given an order for everybody to after the second time he came in
Right.
to bail out because we were in pretty bad shape by that time. Seeing as the front hatch was jammed and that's where I get out, I couldn't get to it, but I'd lost a lot of altitude and I'd got coned and got out of searchlights a couple of times, and I finally decided I couldn't get it out. I'd have to take this crippled Lancaster back to England, so I started to move in that direction, and he came in again. The German night fighter came in again at 5,000 feet and started to roll badly, and I couldn't hold it, so a little window beside the pilot, which is about 3 feet behind, in front of the props, and about 5 to 10 inches away from the prop is away from the fuselage. So I couldn't get through that with my chest pack on that my bomb aimer had given me when he went back to the back of the plane. So I pulled the parachute in the airplane and shoved it out that hole. Somehow it didn't catch on the props, but it did. I didn't know anything about it. And pulled me out behind it and yanked me out through this little hole. And so when I woke up, I was 15 down. I could see the plane burning on the ground. And
No kidding.
See it. But I couldn't see the other two they had got out through a big hole that this fighter had an upward shooting cannon that we hadn't heard about. And it blasted a big hole in the side of the fuselage back into the main spar, and they managed to get out there.
Oh, I see.
And the others didn't get out at all. I might carry on a little bit, but the two that got out were the bomb aimer and the navigator, and jumped out through this side of the hole. And the others were back, and I could see my flight engineer probably trying to help my tail gunner get out. And by the second or third attack, sure they were dead before they hit the ground. So they were all perished in the 4 of them. There was just 7 in the crew.
Oh, I see. 7 of them.
So there's 4 that perished, and the 3 of us got out, and the other 2 became prisoners of war.
And you didn't?
No, I landed in the field in Holland and worked my way down to. I met the underground not too long ago. When I got into Belgium. I wasn't in Holland too long.
Right.
The chief of police for the sector eventually drove me down to the Belgian border. And then I met a lady that happened to work in this house who helped me that, and I've met her since.
Oh, you have? Yeah.
And I didn't meet the police chief. I didn't hear about him until about 1994. 1994, I guess it was.
Really, eh?
Yeah. Or 1980. Sometime not too long ago, and he just passed away, I'd heard, so it was unfortunate I didn't meet him, but I met quite a few others as I've gone back. So then I made my way down to Liège, I guess, was my first contact down there.
Right.
And then I found out the fellow that was helping me there, as I were having trouble with it. I joined the Comet Line in Liège.
The Comet Line. What's the Comet Line?
Comet Line was an escape route, one of about 2 or 3 famous escape routes from Belgium down to Spain. Okay. And so I got in with but they were having trouble with the line, and it broke up, and my number 1 helper named Joseph Heenan, who I've met after the war, of course, and I visited him a couple of times, and he'd been over to visit me a couple of times. So he had been a captain in the Belgian army, and had been in jail a couple of times, but managed to escape, and he is now part of this underground that was helping people out. And then I went back to Liège and went from there to Brussels. Right. I met a number of other people that helped me. One in particular, his name was, he was a Count Grindel, Count Albert Grindel. We called him quite a few other things because we didn't necessarily use his own name, but and I found out afterwards that his brother was head of the Comet Line, but was killed while I was over there, and so should I go on with that theme?
So how did you get back to England?
Yeah, well, I say I rode bicycles and I got trams, and when I got to Brussels, I went with Albert Grindle. I went to, got a train and went from Brussels to Paris.
Okay.
And then I was left in Paris to go and visit a doctor who happened to be with the underground.
Right.
And when I got back to the train, his daughter actually took me from the train in Paris to this place overnight and came back. And my guide, Albert, had 2 American airmen in tow. So we joined forces and took the train from Paris down to Bayonne, southern France.
Yeah.
And visited the church there for a while to wait for dark, and headed on another train into towards Spain, into the Pyrenees.
Oh, okay.
So we got off the train near the Pyrenees Mountains and started walking. And I had Oxford on still. My feet were getting a bit raw, but we climbed up through the rocks and the creeks and so forth, and got to a chalet at the top of the mountains, and Mountain Pass, I guess it really was, and met a Spaniard there that was well known as the guide for the Pyrenees.
So this was in the winter, right?
This was in the winter, yeah. This was January.
Yeah, right.
No, I guess it would be, well, it was really February by that time.
Really, that long? Yeah.
So I guess it would be really February. And it was cold, and it was snow by the time we got there. So we had overnighted in this chalet and had nice coffee, which was a treat. And then we started off in a taxi to go to the British embassy in Portugal, in northern town in Portugal.
Right.
And we got stopped in a place called Elizondo, not too far from where we got the taxi in the first place. So the Spanish caught us there with their fancy flat back hats and so forth. They looked like real soldiers. And they put us in jail, a terrible jail, and it was snowing, as I said. The jail had bars on the windows, but it didn't have any glass in the windows. It was very cold. So we arranged it so that we'd get another taxi with the police escort and take us down to a better jail, which we ended up in Pamplona with the bulls. I mean, I guess that's no bull, but ended up in jail down there, and there's something like 10,000 Canadians in that jail, because every Frenchman that escaped across was a French Canadian when he got there. So it was a jail full.
Oh, they would say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see.
So we had my escort, Albert, the 2 Americans, and myself. And the one American was an officer, I guess, and he went somewhere else. I found out afterward he went to some hotel and had a guard, so he had a little better. We had 2 Czechoslovakians who were in the organization to Tote, which is a German work organization there.
Okay.
2 Czechs. And one other person, 2 other people ended up in there.
So why
there were
did
7 of us in jail for 1 person.
Okay. Why did they put you in jail in the first place?
Because why did they pick us up in the first place?
Yeah.
Well, I guess that was, they were patrolling. We couldn't identify ourselves, couldn't satisfy their curiosity as to what we were doing there, so they decided that I don't know whether we said our guide was looking after all that, whether he admitted that we were escaped flyers or not, I'm not sure.
Right.
You know, we were in jail and we didn't have much of a position to do much about it. And our guide could speak Spanish, so he looked after Albert, who was a great guy. And I couldn't catch up with him after the war.
Really? Eh? Yeah.
You know, oh yeah, there was 7 of us in this one jail, and the 2 Czechs. We used to get soup twice a day. That was our food there, which wasn't too bad. Except the 2 Czechs, they played in the orchestra at the prison. Anyhow, after about a week and a half in jail, the American ambassador came, but he didn't have any luck. But the British military attaché came and got us out of jail. And the two people that we weren't too sure of, they went a different way. I think they were important people in the organization, escape organization. So
okay.
they looked like Englishmen, but one was a Belgian and one was an Englishman.
Right.
But they dressed like these people do, not like the French would do. And so and they got away with it. So it's great. They made their way around. The rest of us went down to Madrid.
Right.
And spent a few days in Madrid and said goodbye to Albert, our guide, because he was going to go back and get some more people. And the two Americans and myself went down to Gibraltar from there on a train. We took the train down to Gibraltar.
Okay.
And stayed a week or so in Gibraltar and went into the middle of the rock of Gibraltar, where they had it all tunneled and had rooms and so forth in there to interview you and whatever they did. They were transmitting stuff from there.
Right.
We saw a plane come and land at the they had an airport there. It had an airstrip, but it ran right off the end of the runway, and so we thought, I guess we're not going to fly out. So we ended up, we caught a ship back to Liverpool.
Right.
That ended the tour, which was a little less than 3 months, I'm finding out now.
Still a while.
Yeah, it's still a while.
On the run for 3 months.
Yeah, not like my helpers that Joseph got caught and spent 2.5 years in Dachau, and the two girls that I stayed with, they got 2 years or 2.5 years in Buchenwald and prisons. And, well, that was a real bad. My 4 people were killed in the aircraft. The other 2 spent 3 years nearly in prisoners of war camps and so forth. And I was home again in 3 months, and so that's why I call it a walk in the park
compared to
what the other people that I was involved with did. So
they really risked their lives for you guys.
Oh yeah, they did. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They would get caught if they got caught. Apart from the POW ones and the helpers and so forth, unless they could talk themselves out of it or could prove they weren't there. They just shot them if they could confirm that they were helping people escape. So there's a little more danger.
Yeah.
If I got caught, I would have probably gone to the prisoner of war camp.
Right.
Even though I was in civvy clothes behind enemy lines.
Right. When you got back to England, did you go back to bombing, or was that it for you for the war?
No, they had a policy at that time. If you'd been behind enemy lines in civilian clothes, they wouldn't let you go again, because if you're caught, you'd be then considered a spy, and that was the reason. Now I know there were people that got shot down and escaped and went back and flew again. And, there's quite a few of them there. But they didn't offer me the opportunity, and I didn't volunteer either.
Right. You had enough.
I'd have had enough, so I stayed in England for a couple of months, I guess, and visited my old squadron, and quite a few people missing from what were there before.
Really, eh? Yeah.
And then I got the Queen Elizabeth home to Canada. 19, when that seemed a year and a half. I was only over in England for about a year and a half.
Really, eh? So it was still during the war you went back?
During the war.
Yeah.
1943, I was back in Canada.
So you must have still done things for the war.
Oh yeah, I did. I still flew. I was posted first as a posting to a little lead. I was posted to the bombing and gunnery school, 8th bombing and gunnery school in Lethbridge.
Oh, okay.
And so I flew students around on bombing and gunnery things, and which I was too excited about. But I met my wife there and got married, so that wasn't all bad. And so then I flew. Then I asked to get into Air Canada. They were looking for pilots, but I happened to be away on holidays when the people came around to interview me, and they didn't give me an opportunity to go somewhere else to interview, but they did give me the opportunity to go on to Transport Command by taking courses in transport flying. So I jumped at that and went back to Nova Scotia, New Brunswick. Went to New Brunswick and took a course as a second pilot.
Right.
And then came out to Victoria and flew a bit here, and then I went back I went to Rockcliffe. I went to Rockcliffe and flew the second pilot for a while, and then I went and took the captain's course in Nova, New Brunswick, and became a captain in Brantford. And then I went to Victoria and flew in 165 Squadron there.
Oh, okay.
Terrible conditions in the winter up to Queen Charlotte Island and back over to Vancouver Island and back in some terrible conditions.
And that was doing supplies. Basically.
Supplies, yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes you take a load of ping pong balls and up to Port Hardy or something, then you'd bring back a pregnant WAF or something like that. So it was really important cargo we were carrying sometimes. And the terrible weather.
Yeah.
You couldn't see the ground. I remember coming into I can't even remember the place, Queen Charlotte Islands anyhow.
Yeah.
Couldn't see a thing and all that through those mountains. I guess I flew for about 3 weeks or 4 weeks. Didn't realize how high the mountains were. It's all radio range flying because you couldn't see the ground there.
Because of the clouds.
Yeah. So I was glad I was posted back to flatter country. So I went.
And so did you spend the remainder of your time in the service doing like training, flying?
The rest of the time after that in Transport Command, I went back to Ottawa and flew in Maintenance Command headquarters, personnel around, and I'd go to Washington, D.C. or out to the West Coast and so forth. And that was a pretty good job. I was also in Ottawa, so there was a practice flight there for the headquarters people, and I used to get Jode into taking them up and seeing if they could fly or not. Sometimes it was hazardous, and most of the time it was pretty good. Yeah. But my main job was to fly these maintenance people around. Right. Which I did. But when I was in 1945, I guess it was, I was in Rockcliffe, and a fellow by the name of the head of the maintenance, head of the transportation squadrons, was a fellow by the name of Z. Louis Lee, group captain, and I was selected to go as second pilot with him down to the San Francisco conference in May in 1945, when it was on forming the United Nations there. Oh, so you were a part of... I was a part of that. We had a number of transport planes that were flying down there regularly, back and forth from Ottawa to San Francisco. And I was just going to, because the group captain was going to inspect the route. I went along with his co-pilot. Got in on some of the things like that, like a cocktail party, which Mackenzie King was in attendance and things like that. Oh, really? Quite interesting. I bet. Different experience, eh? And then we flew up to Vancouver and came back that way. Right. So it was good.
Tell me a little bit about social life in the service. What did you guys do for fun?
Well, overseas?
Yeah.
We had pubs were the main part of my social experience. I spent quite a bit of time in pubs in different places. And there you met people, including women as well. And so you socialized with them, with your buddies. You went out to different places, and that was what we did in our spare time, mostly. When we weren't flying, we were either doing some exercises and flying, or getting lectures, or doing something, or we were at the pub most of the time. At least I was. I don't know. Everybody was. But
did they bring in movies or music or anything like that, or was that not a big thing for you?
Wasn't a big thing for me, but I think it was. Some stations you were glad to have that because they were more isolated. But Nottingham wasn't too far away when I was in 207 Squadron. And Doncaster wasn't too far away when I was in training. Bournemouth was a pretty big place, which I've been back to a couple of times. So the social life was pretty good.
What about leave? Did you ever go on leave while you were there?
Yes. A few days leave. I used to go down to London because I had a girlfriend down there. Okay. I was one of the girlfriends I had. And so I started going down there anyhow. But otherwise I went to, when I was in Scotland, I didn't get any leave in Scotland, I don't think. Different, we he had a good social life, I thought.
Yeah.
Back in Canada, the same sort of routine, except that usually flying. Well, once you get married, you kind of stop going to the pubs. So
Right.
then I raised a family while I was, my son was born while I was still in the services.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
My daughter was born just not too long after I got out. So that was the. Let's see, well, that's about. I got married when I was in Lethbridge, so all the time I was in transport came in. I was out of Ottawa. I managed to get a place in Ottawa, and then I was going to stay in the Air Force, but they posted me up north of Hudson's Bay on a photographic thing, and at the same time they were kicking me out of my apartment that I had put down a lot of money on in Ottawa, so things weren't going that great, so I decided to get out, so I went back to Vancouver.
Is there one memory or experience that stands out the most of your time in the service?
Well, I guess getting shot down and the results of that.
Yeah.
3 months, that was the one that stood out most, of course, of everything. Yeah. There are other instances of, I guess one of the things that when I got court-martialed, that kind of stands out a little bit.
Tell me briefly about what happened there.
Well, the CO of my station came out of the movie theater and said he had to duck because there was I guess it was an Anson flying down the middle of the main street in Lethbridge at night, not in the daytime, at night. So I couldn't see it too well. So he reported that the letters and the numbers on the airplane happened to be the one that I was flying. And but there were several other airplanes around flying at night bombing practices as well. So it was a little confusing. Anyhow, I can remember one instance there because I went to get a lawyer and I decided to go and get the criminal lawyer in Lethbridge who advised me to get a service lawyer for service, which was good advice, of course, because it looked like I might be guilty the other way.
Oh, I see.
As it turned out, there was some difficulty in establishing exactly who was there, and I have an idea because I was one of the few returned veterans who had been in the war. That's the court, the senior people in the court probably were a little reluctant to.
It wouldn't look good politically, you mean?
Yeah, it wouldn't be.
Yeah.
Politically.
Right.
Prudent.
Well, that is.
So that was an experience. They never really told me anything afterwards. I don't even remember saying, well, no, it wasn't. It didn't have conclusive proof or something. Just go back to work, sort of thing.
Huh.
It was a highlight, I guess, in a way.
Mm-hmm.
About the same as the one I got over in England when I was doing steep turns around this smokestack in Doncaster, and somebody spotted my numbers again. This was in the daytime. I was in Lancaster, and I went to a court of inquiry that time. Again, they were short of trained pilots, so I was back on the squadron again. I overlooked those little things. England, I could understand it, but I could never understand it in Lethbridge. My CEO would do that to me.
So tell me, what were your feelings on VE Day?
That's what I would, for a while I thought I was in Lethbridge on VE Day, but I found out I wasn't. I was in San Francisco at the San Francisco conference, which took place on May the 7th, wasn't it, I think? VE Day was May the 7th, 1945, I think.
Right.
Anyhow, I just reading a book, my logbook actually, and found that that's where I was on VE Day, because I wrote a little note in there.
Mm-hmm.
So,
an important place to be.
Yeah, it was of course, I was delighted. I just wished I'd have been in England, but I was delighted.
Right.
And I guess probably had another drink at the cocktail party. I don't remember very much.
After you were discharged, what sort of things did the Army or the military provide you with?
Well, it gave us the option to retrieve certain points that we were entitled to either buy property and buy a house, or go and get education. Those were basically the two things. I don't think you could take money out directly on that. Anyhow, I decided to take the education with my wife and son. We stayed at Little Mountain Camp and with the ex-army camp. We lived there for a couple of years, and then we moved out to UBC, and we got in the army huts out there, which we were quite delighted to get a converted army hut that was made into a home for us.
Right.
And while I was at Little Mountain Camp there, my daughter was born, so I had two children, plus $125 a month or something to go to school. I got that as well as the education you paid for. Right. So I became a professional student, I think. I spent 5 years going to School of Architecture. Definitely the first year I took arts, and the second 4 years I think it was for architecture.
Right.
And graduated with my Bachelor of Architecture in 1952, I think, and then I became in planning.
Okay.
And so I got my Master of Science in Planning after I'm starting to do it all. So then I got kicked out of the UBC. I'd been there long enough, so that was another 2 years on top of that. So about 7 years at UBC.
Wow.
And I went to Vancouver Planning Department and worked there for about 10 years. And then I had the opportunity to set up a planning department in New Westminster in 1966. And I stayed there for 20 years, more or less, and retired in 1985.
Oh, okay. So, what, do you belong to any veterans organizations?
So I belong to the RAF Escaping Society, Canadian branch. I belong to the POW Association. They allowed me in. And I also belong to the Aircrew Association in Canada here. And then I meet every month with the aircrew and sometimes in between.
What sort of things do these organizations provide you with? Like, in terms of support, or, why do you belong to them, basically?
Well, I belong to the POW Association because we raise funds and help people that aren't doing too well. We do the same thing with the RAF Escaping Society, except we help our helpers. They're called helpers. They're people that helped us escape.
Oh, okay.
We used to, and I don't think we do it much now, we used to bring them over to Canada for a visit and then entertain them and have them in your home and so forth. And that's an opportunity to repay them for their assistance.
Right.
And I had Joseph come over and his wife. Aircrew Association, we do some benevolent work as well, air cadets and various things like that. Right. But also help anybody that needs help from our limited funds.
Exactly.
But they're all starting to kind of break up now. But in fact, I'm going next week from now or so. I go to an Aircrew Association. We meet out at the Crescent Beach Legion.
Oh, yeah.
Every month and sometimes in between. And see, Friday we're going to a funeral service for one of our members that's just passed away.
Right.
Things like that. Right. Socialize. That's quite a bit of purely contact and socialization.
Getting together.
Get together.
Do you still maintain some contacts and friendships from your time at war?
Oh, yes, I have a very close friend as my bomb aimer. My navigator I couldn't contact him, and neither could my bomb aimer. Then he's passed away. My bomb aimer lives about 13 miles south of London, Beckenham. and I've visited him quite a few times, and we correspond all the time.
Right.
So we're good friends.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
And I visit back and forth, but I haven't been over for a few years, not that long. And I used to go and visit him, and stay with him, go to the continent with him, and his son happens to work for the EA, the Economic Council, and European Economic Council in Brussels. So it's fortunate that I can stay with him in Brussels and then visit my friends in Holland. I go to Holland to visit Anna. I can't pronounce it.
That's okay.
And Joseph and Caroline.
So you still see him?
So I still see them, and he's still going strong.
Right.
He's about 85 or 86.
Oh, that's great.
And I just got a letter from him not too long ago. We keep in touch with those people, and the ones in Belgium too, in Brussels as well.
Right.
But some of them have passed on since.
Right. Well, what does it mean to you to be a veteran?
Never really thought about it, but I think it means something that you did serve your country and during its hard times, even if you would just as soon not. But I think you feel that you've done your duty type of thing.
Right.
That's important. It's a bit of a perk. Yeah. So.
Right. And how do you observe Remembrance Day then?
Well, I normally go to the service here in New Westminster, in the armories, which I enjoy very much.
Right.
I usually have somebody that reminds me of why I went to war in the first place. And then I usually go down to the cenotaph at the City Hall, and so then I visit there, and sometimes go back to the armories if they'll let me in the officers' mess.
All right.
Drink and then go to the Legion. But it's mostly comradeship and so forth. Even if I don't have that many people that I associated with in the service, I think of them at that time. It's a reflective time for the old buddies and so forth.
Yeah.
So it's quite pleasant.
Right. I think that's it for the interview. Yeah. If there's anything you feel like I've missed, you can tell me now.
Sounds like I covered it as thoroughly as anybody else. But,
okay. Well,
I've got lots of misinterpretations of because it's not necessarily written down. If you want to take these
thank you.
things just to